The Eiger is one of mountaineering's most challenging environments.
Watch out for rocks, seriously.
And so to film the Beckoning Silence required the skills of a whole team of backroom talent. They included not just the normal production crew, but also mountaineers, specialist cameramen and helicopter pilots. In all, over 30 people spent 3 weeks filming on the mountain, often in less than ideal conditions.
That was truly one of the most frightening bloody things I've ever done.
The man responsible for overseeing the safety and logistics of filming was Brian Hall. But even for such a highly accomplished mountaineer, with over 50 productions to his credit, it was a daunting challenge.
It's a minefield, really. There's so many possible things that could go wrong. I've worked in a lot of difficult mountain environments, but the north face of the Eiger is one of the most difficult environments in the world to work on. Whenever you start off on a journey of making a film of such an epic story, then you have to put a lot of planning in place.
So we'd have to have a really good rigging here.
We went out onto the Eiger, did various recces, looked at locations, and that's where people started to realise the scale of the project. The team that was going to go out there would have to have certain qualities, and those qualities didn't just mean they could take good shots or direct or do whatever. They had to be hardy individuals who could withstand cold, stand there shivering in -10, as snow poured on top of them, be adaptable to walk in strange situations with crampons on their feet, be strong enough to be able to look down at 1,000 foot below them with space between their legs.
You see where the footsteps are that go ahead right in front of you, Brian? If we just made sure that about as much clean snow as exists now, perhaps even a little bit more if possible, then we're fine because we've got a clean foreground.
The film's director, Louise Osmond, was clear from the start. She wanted to use the actual locations in the Tony Kurtz story wherever possible.
Shots of Kurtz and Joe climbing that are kind of lower slopes area here, and then rock climbing of both in the sort of towards the difficult crack area.
The director of photography, Jeremy Hewson, was not a mountaineer, but Brian Hall still needed to get him and his camera to the heart of the action.
I had to work very closely with Jeremy and the DOP, getting him into the best situations possible. And Jeremy would go anywhere, worse snow conditions, biggest drops.
So, good, eh?
Very good.
You can use, you know, it's going that way, that way, that way.
If we drop them down to there and bring them up, we've got 2 cameras getting this. Whereas if he's over there and I'm shooting across, we've got 2 very distinctly different angles.
Yeah.
I had to put some limits on it, really, and that's where Keith came into his own.
Down there is something like, I think it's something like 4,000 feet all the way back down into the town.
Keith specialises in climbing camera work, and that's generally what he does.
Yeah, if you went, you wouldn't stop for a long, long time.
He can actually work in very difficult vertical situations to capture climbing at its best.
While Keith Partridge could get to the most difficult places on the mountains, it still left one huge challenge. How to get the 4 characters reenacting the drama of the Tony Kurtz expedition onto the mountain face. It seemed an impossible task.
I couldn't see really how we were going to make drama work on there. But then after discussions we decided that we were going to use mountain guides as the Kurtz team, and it was at that point that I thought, well, perhaps it's possible, because there's no way that we were going to train actors to a level of competence and safety so they could operate on the north face of the Eiger.
Okay, stay still on the rope now, Roger. Roger, just stay still, you're very, very cold.
We got 4 people together, Roger, Simon, Cyril and Dres, and they were all young, early 20s, Swiss guides. All of them had climbed the Eiger several times, some of them by new routes, and they were fantastic. They were fantastic from my point of view because I could leave them alone and knew they were safe. They'd never acted before, and yet they looked like naturals. They were always doing something. Whenever they weren't in front of camera, where they should have been getting the makeup putting on, they were clambering up some rocks or banging pitons in. Whenever we said, here's a challenge, they did it.
The film also required Joe Simpson to retrace parts of the route of the Kurtz expedition. But with such a demanding schedule, it was impossible for him to climb the entire mountain.
Cubby's ready now.
Instead, he accessed the face using the door from the railway tunnel that goes up inside the Eiger. Joe would be required to talk to camera as he climbed, and Brian Hall was concerned for his safety, so he teamed him up with Dave Cubby Cuthbertson.
Cubby and Joe have known each other for ages and both respect each other. What we wanted to do is have somebody that Joe felt comfortable with, that he could chat with and be at home on the mountains.
Slam the door in the face.
Joe and Cubby are just setting off now, and we're going to film them going in between the lower slopes and the difficult crack. And then tomorrow, hopefully, we'll film them higher up on Hinterstoiser, the Swallow's Nest. We're hoping that the sun will come out, weather will stabilise, but today's right on the edge. The forecast for tomorrow is exactly the same, so it's really difficult planning.
But the upper parts of the Eiger weren't readily accessible from the railway tunnel. Getting everyone onto the face and the cameraman in position needed the use of a helicopter. Choreographing everybody to make sure they were in the right position at the right time was a major logistical exercise.
Well, the crack is that Joe and Cubby are going to go around onto the Hinterstoiser, up the first ice field a little bit, onto the Swallow's Nest, and we're going to be right behind them all the way, or in front of them, or above them, or below them, or wherever we can get to film and to tell the story, really. So we're waiting for Hans Rudy, who's going to come in from Lauterbrunnen with the chopper, and he's going to get landed on a ledge about 15 feet above the Swallow's Nest. Next in will be Joe and Cubby. They can then start getting themselves established down towards the Hinterstoiser, and then it'll be Paul and myself going in last. So we suspect it'll be in the chopper, winch line down for about, I don't know, 30 metres maybe. Something like 3,000 foot of fresh air underneath your heels, so it's going to be moderately entertaining, I think.
But even using a helicopter to access the mountain face didn't make it any less dangerous.
One of the problems of this procedure that we're doing is that we're actually connected to a helicopter by a very strong cable, although it's very, very thin. But then at one stage we actually connect ourselves to the mountain. So we are piggy in the middle between the mountain, the north face of the Eiger, and the helicopter. And I'm not quite sure which one is the strongest, but I can imagine that if the helicopter decides to fly away, it'll probably split me in two.
Quite windy, wasn't it, for a bit?
The Eiger is a serious place to be. It's been the scene of many accidents, and Joe's witnessed some of those accidents, which he writes about in Beckoning Silence. You have to be fit, you have to be climbing well. Safety was the biggest issue. It wasn't negotiable. We had to do the filming without loss of life or injury or anything else like that. We had to adapt to what the weather and the conditions on the face of the Eiger gave us, rather than going chasing them.
Waiting for weather windows became a regular occurrence for the crew, but as soon as the weather broke, they had to be ready to go at a moment's notice.
Basically, we're asking them to go up in a helicopter,
Well, we're going to go
fly
on the
towards the
helicopter.
north face of the Eiger, and then step out of the helicopter and descend on a 5mm wide cable.
You done this before, Joe? I've been rescued once from the Drew, and it was about a 60-foot wire, which is 5 mil, same as this. And looking up, that looked incredibly thin. So God knows what 180 feet of it's going to look like. The thing I don't like is the winch man with the wire cutters. really sticks in my head for some reason. I don't know why. Right, oh, you're not standing by, Keith, are you?
As filming progressed, the weather closed in once again, and it was imperative to get Joe and the team off the mountain before the storm struck.
Have a good D-rig, Hans.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I'm not joining you.
Yeah, too bad. Yes, I bet you are.
No, I wouldn't mind it. Yeah.
I wouldn't mind D-rigging either. The trouble is that when you're winched out, it's worse because you've realised how far up you are. I mean, you've just been fooling around on the interstoicer, and it's pretty apparent that it's a couple of thousand feet underneath you, and you're in a nice secure ledge, and this little wire comes in, and you have to just relax and just go with it. But what he does is he swings out, and the helicopter goes away from the face to stop rotors, rocks and stuff in the rotors, and the cable starts going, and it goes click, 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 all the way out. I thought it was absolutely bloody terrifying coming out.
The experience of being lifted off the face by helicopter brought home to Joe just how hazardous Tony Kurtz and his colleagues' retreat from the mountain must have been.
Today, I would have found that really difficult. I would have found it really difficult because how the hell they did it in those days. And I can understand how they couldn't get back. It's just impossible. And also, I was looking across the sea. See, when I crossed the interstoicer last time, it was in a huge storm, and it was just a deluge of water, and I didn't bother looking down, surprisingly enough. But today, because you guys spent so long getting in and out of helicopters, I was hanging there for a long time, and I looked across at where they'd abseiled down, and I thought it was broken ground. It wasn't vertical, but it was very compact rock, just like the Hinderstoicer, going down at 60, 70, probably tipping near 80 degrees at one point, and then I could see a ledge where they would probably have stopped, and then it went off. And I've reassessed what they were doing, actually. I thought they would, their first few abseils would have done pretty bad stuff. I wouldn't like, just seeing what I saw, I wouldn't like to go down with a classic abseil. And with an injured man, it would have been hell.
Further back and down?
To bring the story alive, we had to really film the action close up. But to get the camera team onto the Eiger and film the whole of the story on the north face of the Eiger was clearly impossible. We had to do it in manageable bites. We had to do some of the filming on the north face of the Eiger to create the jeopardy, to make the audience feel as though they're there and with the Kurtz team. But at the same time, we had to be able to film it quite close up at the side or in other places and locations that we could duplicate for being on the north face of the Eiger. So we had to split the shooting into various areas purely from a safety point of view. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to create the action of the story.
The most challenging sequences to film were those involving fatal falls. The director wanted absolute reality.
The actual crucial fall sequence, the accident that from then on precipitated the deaths of the whole of the team was not possible on the north face of the Eiger. And so we used this cliff to the side of the Eiger Gletscher, and it was very, very complex. We had to build it like a jigsaw, different elements in different places.
It's a very simple shot in what's going to end up, but in actual fact doing it is really, really complicated because it involves a rope going through carabiners really quickly.
Action!
People smacking against the walls.
We tried to smash him against the rock and kept smashing against the rock. Finally we decided to do the reverse. Pulling him away from the rock seemed like a really, easy solution, but we couldn't make it crisp enough, so eventually what we had to do was have people hurtling down the slope on skis, pulling him and pulling ropes through carabiners to make it look really quite explosive.
Okay, cut there.
Within the accident sequence, there's a long fall, and Dres, who was playing the part of Ongra, had to do the fall.
But we're doing a test fall, so what we do, we have to get all the lengths right and everything. We've already done a couple, but we're just testing everything for cameras now. With a weighted bag, the weighted bag's up there, and drop down, so that we don't have to do it too many times with a real person. It has got its risks if we don't do everything correctly and test it properly.
Okay.
It's quite a complex stunt because he has to go a long way from a position that's away from camera, out of shot, and there's no leeway in terms of safety because obviously if the rope snaps or if anything comes down on top of him that might hit him when he's doing the fall, all these, it has to be rehearsed, it has to be put together and choreographed. We start building the stunt up and we lower Dres into position and then we release the rope.
How was that, Dres? Is it okay?
Great. No.
Yeah? Ready to go again?
Yeah, I have to.
Yeah.
No, that's not that hard.
As is normal in filming, you can't get everything in one take, and so Dres had to do these falls multiple times, and each time it was like, hey, this is not this is not a pretty sight when watching. Bent back, and it's very difficult to rig as well.
3, 2, 1, drop. And that's a cut. Dres, you okay? That was a great fall, Dres.
Excellent. Thank you, Dres.
That was amazing.
Having survived the fall, Dres's work for the day still wasn't over.
This fall was a central part of the accident sequence, and the end point, he slammed against the rock, and we did that in a separate sequence at ground level. One of the most dramatic parts of the whole of the fall sequence was when they're engulfed by an avalanche. Now, avalanches are difficult to create, and one of the reasons why they're difficult to create is that when you put a lot of snow together, it becomes heavy. And so if you have too little, it just looks pathetic. If you have too much, it could be potentially dangerous, very, very dangerous.
In the final film, the falling scenes that had taken days to painstakingly recreate lasted just a few seconds.
we got to know the four Swiss lads so well during the filming. There's a direct analogy from 70 odd years ago. These guys were the same guys. They were ambitious young lads full of joy. Dres, Simon, Cyril and Roger were exactly that. The difference was just 70 odd years.
It's our last day, we've got hundreds of shots to do, and it's just so spectacular up here. And so we're doing shots of Joe Simpson climbing up this ridge and Cubby, and we're summit now. Taking shots, great spin drift, cloud below us, just couldn't be better.
It was 3 weeks hard work, but really rewarding work. It was a team effort, everybody played their part, and I hope we've done justice to Kurtz and his team who died so tragically, and also did justice to the book that Joe wrote about them.
Always one step away from an ice accident.
One, drop.